What if everything you thought about caste was wrong? Was caste based discrimination truly prevalent in ancient India? Is caste the same as Varna? What do Jati, Kula, Gotra, Varna all refer to? And how do they relate to caste? Do we need caste based reservations or not? Do we need caste census? Stick around as we explore the origins of caste, debunk the myths, and find out whether we need caste census and caste based reservations or not. We are diving into this controversial topic, and things are going to get interesting. Before we dive into the chaos of modern day caste drama, let's ask the big question: did our ancient scriptures really advocate for caste based discrimination? And if they did, was it as rigid as we have been led to believe? One of the most famous and most misunderstood texts in this context is the Manusmriti. The catch? Most of the translations we have today are so corrupted they would make even a politician blush. The authentic text? Long gone. What we are left with are misinterpretations that make for great TV debates but have little to do with the truth. Take the famous society as a body analogy. Brahmins as the head and Shudras as the feet. The lazy interpretation? The feet are inferior. But here's the deal: try walking around without your feet. Spoiler, doesn't work. Shudras were the movers and shakers without whom the society would not even function. Even Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar, in his book Who Were Shudras, mentions that the modern day Shudras have nothing to do with the Vedic Shudras. Every Varna or social class was seen as vital for the smooth functioning of society. No feet, no body, no Shudras, no society. Look at this beautiful story of Satyakama Jabali, a poster boy for Varna by choice and not by birth. Satyakama, a young boy, wanted to become a disciple of Gautama Rishi. But oh no, he didn't know his father's identity. So, like any good son, he goes back to his mom. And what does she tell him? She truthfully conveyed to him that she had served and had relationships with many men, and therefore she too doesn't know who is his father. And what does Satyakama do? He tells Gautama Rishi the truth as is without any filters. And Gautama Rishi then does the most un-2024 thing ever. He accepts Satyakam Jabali as his disciple. Why? Because of his commitment to honesty. Gautama didn't care that Satyakama didn't have a fancy lineage. His truthfulness made him a Brahmin. Yep, you heard the right. Being a Brahmin was about your character and qualities, not your last name. What about Eklavya? A story everyone loves to misquote. Eklavya, a Nishada, which by the way is a mixed caste, not some lower caste label, wanted to learn archery from Dronacharya, the royal tutor of the Pandavas and Kauravas. But Drone turns him down. The reason? It was caste discrimination. Actually, it wasn't. Drona's hands were tied. He was on the royal payroll. His loyalty was to the throne, and training the royal princes to be the best warriors was part of his job description, his JD. As Drone says in Mahabharata, Arthasya Purusho Daso Das Asti Arthana Kasyachit, which means man is slave to the wealth, wealth is slave to none. What he's indicating is that he was duty bound to the royal princes, and hence he could not have taught Eklavya. He wasn't an independent teacher, but a salaried employee. Do you know, in Mahabharata, Drone refers to Eklavya as Maharaj because he's the adopted son of Hiranyadhanus, who was the commander of Jarasan's army. His biological father was Devashrava, who in turn was brother of Vasudev, Krishna's biological father, which makes Eklavya Krishna's cousin. You still want to refer to Eklavya as a tribal? What about Karna, the wronged hero of the Mahabharata? Here's what people miss. Yes, Karna was raised as a Sutta, a mixed caste of charioteers and heralds, but his life struggles weren't just because of caste. Let's clear this up. Karna was trained by Dronacharya. So yeah, no caste exclusion there at all. But Drone didn't teach him the Brahmastra. Frustrated, Karna sought out Parshuram. And here's where things get messy. Parshuram curses Karna not just because he was a Kshatriya, but because Karna lied about his identity. Parshuram wasn't just anti Kshatriya for no reason. His past was filled with battles against Kshatriyas who had crossed the line, and hence his vow that he will only teach Brahmins. By the way, he did make an exception. he did teach Bhishma, a Kshatriya prince. So Karna's fate in this context was more about honesty and politics than just caste. Moral of the stories: the Varna system wasn't some rigid, birthright based institution. It was fluid, meritocratic, emphasizing qualities and actions over lineage. The caste system we talk about today is a far cry from what ancient Sanatani Indian society envisioned. Now let's explore what these terms Varna, Kula, Gotra, and Jati actually mean. Each of them serves a distinct purpose in the Sanatan Dharma, and it's about time we get them right. Let's start with Varna. It comes from the root word var, which means choice. I've explained this at length in my earlier episode. Varna system gets all the bad press, but it's actually not about where you're born, it's about what you choose to do. You don't just get assigned to a Varna like picking a Hogwarts house. You choose it based on your skills and tendencies. It's the original career guidance system minus the student loans. For example, Brahmins, the nerds, teachers, scholars, priests, the ones who always have a book in hand telling you about the secrets of the universe while you're just trying to finish your lunch. Kshatriyas, on the other hand, the warriors and the rulers, think of them as the world's managers dealing with security, governance, and war. Basically, the ones who run toward danger while the rest of us run for cover. Vaishyas, the business folks, traders, merchants, farmers, they are the ones handling your money and food, which makes them pretty important, right? And Shudras, the hands on workers, artisans, laborers, craftsmen. They're like the backstage crew in a rock concert. Without them, nothing works, but they rarely get the spotlight. Purpose? Well, just like you can't run a company with only CEOs and no staff, society needs every type. Each Varna is like an organ in the body. Brahmins are the brains, Kshatriyas the muscles, Vaishyas the gut. Yes, wealth matters. And Shudras the limbs. Dismiss one, and you will see the whole system collapse faster than a bad startup. Next up is Kula. Think of it as your clan or extended family. Yes, the people you can't avoid at family reunions. It's broader than your nuclear family and includes several generations. Now, don't get it twisted. Kula doesn't determine your Varna. Just because your dad's a doctor doesn't mean you're destined to wear scrubs for life. Kula is more about social upbringing, your family's values, and moral guidance. Purpose is like your home base, but it's not a straight jacket. You're free to break away and make your own path. Just be prepared for family WhatsApp group to explode when you do. Now, Gotra is where it gets interesting and kinda scientific. Gotra refers to your lineage, specifically your male lineage. If you and someone else shares the same Gotra, you're likely descended from the same ancient sage, and the rule is don't marry into them. It's like the original Tinder algorithm for avoiding inbreeding. For example, if you belong to the Bharadwaj Gotra, that means your ancestral line traces back to the sage Bharadwaj. Whether you're a Brahmin or Kshatriya, your Gotra doesn't change, and it mainly comes into play when figuring out who's off limits for marriage. Purpose? Simple: prevent genetic mayhem and avoid making family dinners super awkward. Finally, we arrive at Jati, which is what most people confuse with caste today. Originally, if Varna was about division of labor, Jati was like a job specialization within your Varna. If you're a Vaishya, for instance, you could be a merchant, a landowner, a farmer, a cattle breeder, a moneylender, etc. Each would be a different Jati. Purpose? Originally, it helped fine tune the economy, encouraging specialization. So, we have covered how caste wasn't this rigid, birth based hierarchy back in the day. But does that mean caste based discrimination is a fallacy? Hardly. The truth is, discrimination exists, and we can see it around us today in disturbing forms. Despite being banned, the practice of manual scavenging persists, largely involving Dalits. The frequent deaths of scavengers due to hazardous working conditions reflect caste based occupational stratification and endangers lives. Hathras incident, Unnao rape case, Saharanpur violence, Dharmapuri violence, Mirchpur Dalit killings, Khairlanji massacre, Afsar massacre. List is long. If these instances, cases makes you uncomfortable, good. They should. They are a jarring reminder that the system has devolved into something that thrives on discrimination. But how did we get here from the more fluid, merit based society of ancient Sanatan India? Back in the golden days, kids across all Varnas, social classes, were sent to Gurukul. A Gurukul wasn't your average tuition center, it was an immersive, holistic education system where children were educated together regardless of their Varna. The environment allowed each child to discover their strengths, tendencies, and preferences with guidance from their guru, independent of their family's profession. In other words, if you had the brains for it, the muscle for it, the aptitude for it, you could go from being a Vaishya to a Brahmin, no biggie. But then things started to crumble. The Gurukul system faded and education shifted back to home based learning. When kids started staying home and learning their family's trade, social mobility took a hit. Suddenly, the son of a blacksmith became a blacksmith, the daughter of a weaver became a weaver, and just like that, we lost the fluidity of the Varna system. This is quite the same as the modern nepotism. Think of the lawyer's kid who just happens to become a lawyer, or the actor's child who's handed roles in Bollywood. There is nothing wrong in it. This is natural and organic. But what it surely does is that it reinforces the status quo, where family influence dictates professional choices. The result? Caste system slowly began to concretize, and where you were born started defining your profession and social standing. The ancient balance, where people could choose their varna based on qualities and interests, slowly vanished. And here's where things went even more downhill. During both Portuguese and British rule, missionaries leveraged these growing caste distinctions for religious conversions. The Goa Inquisition, led by the Portuguese, targeted Brahmins, labeling them as oppressors to create discord amongst castes. This divide provided a foothold for missionaries who exploited the grievances of the so called lower castes to push Christianity. Sounds manipulative? That's because it was. Susan Bailey also points out how colonial policies exaggerated caste to vilify Brahmins and promote conversion efforts. Caste wasn't just a social structure, it was a tool for spreading Christianity by preying on the oppressed and presenting conversion as an escape. And then there's the British East India Company, who treated caste divisions as political chess pieces. Scholar Dirk Kolff, in his book Naukar, Rajput, and Sepoy, explains how the company used caste to ensure loyalty within the military, exacerbating the divisions between groups. Let's not forget Bernard Cohn's observation that the British used ethnographic tools as weapons. By locking caste into census records and legal codes, they could turn flexible social roles into rigid identities. This manipulation allowed them to more efficiently govern a divided society while also setting up future conflicts. By the time we hit the infamous 1871 British census, they had officially codified caste into over 3,000 categories. Historian Nicholas Dirks, in his study Castes of Mind, reveals that the British didn't just observe the caste system, they actively created it for their own administrative convenience. Their goal? Divide and rule. This wasn't about understanding Indian society, it was about keeping it fragmented enough to control easily. B.R. Ambedkar, the architect of India's constitution, had to undo the damage in the 20th century by introducing legal safeguards for the marginalized castes. Ambedkar himself argued that colonial policies turned caste into a weapon of oppression and control. But are these safeguards enough? Have they worked? How long should they continue? Many upper caste individuals, particularly from economically disadvantaged backgrounds, argue that they are being unfairly excluded from opportunities due to the quota system, which reserves government jobs, educational seats, and other opportunities for scheduled castes, SC, scheduled tribes, ST, and other backward classes, OBC. For example, many Brahmins or Kshatriyas from lower income families do not have access to these reserved benefits despite facing poverty and lack of access to education. This has led to movements like the Patidar reservation protests led by Hardik Patel in Gujarat and the demand for reservation by the Maratha community in Maharashtra, both of which argue that economically backward upper castes deserve a slice of the reservation pie. This refers to the well off families from the OBC or SC/ST categories as well, who continue to benefit from the reservation system even though they may no longer face the discrimination that these policies were designed to address. For example, families that have been economically uplifted for generations but continue to avail the benefits of reservation, effectively reducing opportunities for those who are truly in need of the system's support. One of the criticisms of the current reservation system is that it often prioritizes caste over merit, which has led to concerns about efficiency and fairness, especially in higher education and public sector jobs. This is particularly evident in the competitive exams for institutions like IITs, AIMS, where general category candidates often need much higher scores to secure seats, while reserved category students benefit from lower cutoffs, even though their socio-economic situation may not be as disadvantaged. We thus face a dual reality. While affirmative action has helped many, caste based oppression continues in the form of everyday discrimination and violence, particularly in rural areas where traditional hierarchies are still deeply entrenched. On the other hand, the misuse of the system by affluent lower caste individuals undermines the very goals of affirmative action. These groups have long climbed the social and economic ladder, yet continue to receive benefits, depriving more deserving individuals from the marginalized sections. Where does this leave us? And coming back to the critical questions, do we need to continue the caste based reservations? And do we need a caste census? Clearly, we cannot come up with a clear yes or no answer. This is a much nuanced debate and we need a lot more deeper thought on the same. I would want to say the following. One, those in the upper caste feel just because of some random chance they were born into an upper caste that they have some divine right to oppress the lower caste. They are terribly wrong. And most importantly, our Sanatan Dharma has always been against this. Two, those in the lower caste who are in the creamy layer and who still continue to take privileges and benefits, there is a lot for them to introspect too. Aren't they wronging their own brothers and sisters by holding up the benefits? Three, for all Hindus, there is a clear need to go back to our roots, cleanse the impurities that have come into a dharma, and be united through the process rather than be divided. Unity is of utmost importance. And when I say this, I just don't mean Hindus in terms of a religious identity. Even our courts agree that Hindu is a way of life. Anyone and everyone who identifies themselves with this nation, with this civilization, with this culture is a Hindu. And for all of us, the divide and rule is still being played out, not just by politicians, but by other extremist religious groups as well. Four, we also need to improve on the caste based reservations. It certainly needs to continue, but only by taking into account the creamy layer issues and concerns of the economically backward upper castes as well. And five, lastly, instead of a caste census, we need a much deeper and wider caste review that would help us identify all the castes and subcastes that are non creamy and genuinely being oppressed and discriminated against. Would love to know what you think about this. What are your recommendations? Please comment and share your thoughts. Also, if you like this video, please share and subscribe. Till the next time, Namaste, Namaste.